In case you don't know, we use Anchor to distribute our podcast. We love it because it's free, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more. There's no minimum listenership to start earning money, if that's a goal for your podcast. And everything you need to make a podcast is in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started creating your own podcast.
All right, so budget ceilings.
I think that we should say from the get-go about budget ceilings that after having researched them, neither one of us really like this budget system at all. But as we said from the outset, if we think that something is terrible, we'll also tell you why.
Right.
And that is the case with budget ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So the most basic for a budget ceiling is you set a cap on what you're going to spend for the month and you don't exceed that cap.
So I feel like in such a short statement like that, it seems like a good idea, except that the other piece of that budget method is that it basically says, like, if you exceed the cap, then you just adjust it to increase your cap. That is not necessarily always the best practice, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So having a spending limit is a great idea. I will say that is a fantastic idea. I will, however, also say that in rare instances is your best bet to increase your budget category instead of decrease your spending in a budget category. The exceptions to that are, one that comes to my mind, groceries. If you are consistently overspending on groceries and you're not able to decrease that spending, which is very likely in a lot of instances, if you've got a bigger family, if you have an area in which food is much more expensive, there are all kinds of reasons that could be an area where it's not feasible to decrease the spending, but instead having to increase your spending limit in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I think of, insurance. For some people, it's not possible to decrease what you spend on insurance, whether it be just vehicle or homeowners or renters or whatever it is. Sometimes that's just out of your control. You can shop around all you want. You're not going to find anything cheaper. Then you do just have to increase that spending limit.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there are instances that you can decrease the spending.
Yeah, and I will say a big part of the reason that I don't like it is because the way that it's often presented is that you don't categorize your money, at least how I've seen it, which if you dive into that budget method, you haven't categorized your money and you don't know how much your bills are, you could think, like say you make $2,000 in a month, and so you think, oh great, I'm going to spend $1,700 this month. Well, what if you don't take your bills into consideration with that, right? What if you forget a bill because you didn't write it down? I feel like this is a budget method for people who have a lot of money. And if you have a lot of money, you're probably not listening to this podcast.
Right. I think that this budget method in this instance, it makes it very easy to overspend and to do so in ways that could be very detrimental to your financial health.
Yes.
If you are listening to this podcast because you are trying to find the perfect budget for you and you go through and you search, if you just do a quick Google search for budget ceiling method, as I think what I searched or something like that, it's very rare to find this one in a personal finance application. It is more often applied to business spending, but it is one that does sometimes get applied to personal spending. It's very few and far between because it is not a practical budget method for people who are looking to manage their personal finances. And I don't know a ton about business finance, but I can see in a sense why they would use this method. I wouldn't necessarily if I were in charge of a business finance account.
Yeah, same.
But for, I would say, larger organizations, I could see why they would use that instead of using a method where they're much more closely monitoring each and every dollar that is being spent in certain categories.
Yes. And I would, when you're looking at business applications too, this is just my own imagination, that this is also a budget method for like legitimate for-profit businesses. and we've said this every week now, that a budget should make your money easy for you. And I just really don't think that this is a budget method that's going to make your money easy for you. I feel like it's going to make you have to think about your money in a way that isn't helpful.